Good evening. If those who aren't seated can take their seats, we will get started. Now that all of our panelists are here, except for Jose Cambrils and Howard Pearl. Jose is in Nashua at a prior engagement, and Howard is quite ill. So he is not going out lately, so that's probably a wise decision not to come here tonight. I'm Jim Miller. For anyone that doesn't know me yet, I'm your town moderator, but tonight I am not acting as town moderator, I am simply a moderator. And the Canterbury Committee for Democracy has asked me to do this. I think we've done 2 or 3 of these. We have people on Zoom. We have our 6 panelists here. Just going to go through a few quick notes. If I can find them. You'll notice a microphone here. That is a microphone for the Zoom session people, and it will pick up all the voices on stage. So, and I think it'll pick mine up as well. So hopefully they're doing okay. I will not be handing this microphone around for questions, but I will repeat questions from the audience, and I will be handing this around to the candidates so they can speak. Fire exits right behind you or down the hall here. Bathrooms are down the hall. We're going to be doing this on a fairly tight time schedule. So the introductions by candidates are 2 minutes each. We have our famous timer here. Candidates, if you see that yellow page go up, you have 30 seconds to wrap up whatever you're saying. If the red goes up, hand the microphone back, you're done. Sorry, otherwise we'll be here all night. I am going to be asking 2 questions about 2 fairly newsworthy issues. Those will also be 2 minutes each for the candidates. Again, a fairly short amount of time, but given that the format, we're going to go through time pretty quickly. Audience questions will be 1 minute each for each candidate to answer. If there's a question for a particular candidate and not for the others can take the opportunity, if they wish, to chime in on that. If they think it's appropriate, they will also have up to a minute. But if they don't want to say something about something that may be very specific, then that's fine too. That'll give us more time for audience questions. At the very end, candidates will have 2 minutes to do a couple of things. If this is not a debate, so if someone at the table says something and maybe it's about you or about your party or whatever in terms of a vote or a position, and you want to respond, you won't have that opportunity until the end. So jot down what you want to say. The end is for things you also say, oh, rats, I meant to talk about that, or anything else like that, and to just sort of wrap up. So that's at the very end. Everyone will get 2 minutes across the panel. Questions from the audience and from Zoom, folks. No speeches, just a question. Focused, as simple as you can get. It'll save us time. Let's see, anything else? The Zoomers will have my cell phone number if they want to send questions, and with any luck, it'll actually work. If any of you folks have literature that you want to leave, there's a table in the back you can put it at. We had an extra table, so I thought that would be a good thing. All right, so I think that's going to be it. So we will get started. We're being, I don't know what the word is anymore, recorded, filmed, videoed for later distribution. And I believe the session's being recorded, the Zoom session. Okay, so those who aren't here will have a chance to see this in action. So First, I will hand the mic around from this end, and we'll be going kind of back and forth as we do questions. But if you can introduce yourself and say why you're running and anything else that you want us to know within your 2 minutes. You're going to use this mic. You're going to use this mic, which is for the room. That mic stays there, and it'll pick all of you up.
So Jim, I want Chris to be sure he started the recording.
I was not told to.
Well, this would be a good time, because my stuff is all, you know.
That's what I thought.
Nobody cares about me.
And should they already have your phone number?
Do you want me to?
It's in the chat.
Check that.
Where is
Record button. Maybe someone who's down.
more for it?
That's it.
Should I
Little
look at
smart.
it?
All right, okay. So we'll start again, why you're running and, well, who you are, why you're running, and anything else you want us to know. 2 minutes.
Right. Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Canterbury, for holding this. This is,
You can stay right
it's, I'd rather stand, let's stand here. So,
I'll stand over here.
Okay.
Others won't be able to come around. and
Sure.
do the same,
so I live in Boston. I live on a farm there. I am a small business owner, started a business here in New Hampshire about 11 years ago. I am a coverage volunteer, as well as volunteers to other UNH extension programs, steward of our environment here in New Hampshire. I am an author and corporate speaker on wellness and work-life balance. Now, all those titles are wonderful, but there's something that happened to me about 7 months ago that's way more important to me, and it really drives me for what I'm doing here today. About 7 months ago, I became a father for the first time to twins. So this will be past my bedtime. Seriously, I sleep as soon as they go to sleep. Anybody here in the audience, a parent? And you know, it's interesting what it does for me. I'll speak for myself. Is that it makes you think beyond yourself. So when I thought about issues I was always passionate about, which is the environment, our school system, really just making this a wonderful place to live, which New Hampshire is, and keeping that. And it's always in my lifetime, but now with children, I'm thinking beyond me. So what happens 6 years when they're here and when hopefully their children are here as well? That's why I'm running. I'm running to really make this New Hampshire a wonderful place that's beyond where we go, where we stop, it keeps on going. So that means looking at, net zero emissions by 2050, by looking at what we can do for our environment, looking at how we can strengthen our schools, and really protect our families going forward. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Alvin C. and I'm running for state representative in District 26. First, I was asked by Senator Howard Pearl to convey his apologies for not being here this evening. He caught a cold and is feeling under the weather today, and plus he does not want to spread the cold to anyone else. Again, I'm Alvin C. I'm running for District 26, which includes Canterbury and 7 other towns. I'm now retired, but formerly a product designer, design engineer, along with several other titles at Comark Communications, now Hitachi Comark, in Southwick, Massachusetts. I want to do what I can to reduce or at least not increase the tax burden on the citizens of Canterbury and the rest of New Hampshire. While the federal government can and does print money, which results in the higher prices that we are seeing everywhere, New Hampshire can only take taxes and fees from all its citizens and the businesses that provide jobs for us to fund all government activities. I'm in favor of school choice and helping parents find the best educational opportunities for the particular needs of their children. I'm in favor of reducing obstacles to increasing the supplies of natural gas and electricity in New Hampshire. Winters can get very cold in New Hampshire. I support the Second Amendment and I am pro-life. For our elections, I support requiring a state-issued ID to vote. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelly Roberts, and I'm excited to be here tonight as your Democratic candidate for New Hampshire State Senate District 17. I'm from New Hampshire. I grew up in Deerfield, and if you don't know Deerfield, it's the home of the Deerfield Fair, which is the best fair in my opinion. Issues that affect us all, right off the bat, I'm going to say property tax burden is a major priority for me. We have one of the highest property tax burdens in the nation, and that's not just the statistic, it's the truth, and I want to work to address that. And we can think outside the box, because as soon as you mention income tax or sales tax, everyone just shuts down. So we need to get back to basics and come up with some solutions that will help relieve granted standers who are suffering from this burden. I'm also an advocate for reproductive freedoms. I'll always fight for that. I will fight for our climate. And another issue that I'm very passionate about is affordable housing in New Hampshire, or lack thereof. So that's something I want to work to address, which I think directly ties with our homelessness issue that we are facing. I grew up in New Hampshire, so I've seen the drastic increase in homelessness. And in New Hampshire, in District 17, I can say, I know people that are employed living in their cars because they can't afford housing. That's unacceptable. We need to do something about it.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm Ed Frederick. My wife and I live in Loudon, and we've lived there now for 5 years, but my connection with New Hampshire goes back into the early 80s when I came here. I was born and grew up in the Midwest outside of Chicago, went to college in Iowa. While in college, I joined ROTC, Navy ROTC, and upon graduating, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. So after college, I spent 4.5 years serving in the Marine Corps as a naval flight officer, navigator on an A6, and then ran an officers club. And upon getting out, I spent then the next 50 years in the hospitality industry, managing and operating hotels and restaurants around the country. I've probably lived in 17 states and have a very varied background, very diverse. I've been exposed to a lot of cultures, and I think I can bring that to the state legislature. I think having that experience is a benefit. I really fell in love with New England back in the early 80s. I came here, I actually ran a hotel in Concord back in 1982, and then in Merrimack, New Hampshire, as well as was active in the New Hampshire Hospitality Association. So I've got good connections with New Hampshire, and I would like to see what I can do to try to relieve some of the burden on our homeowners of the property tax that is encumbersome on them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ruth Heath, and I'm running to represent you in the New Hampshire State House. I have lived in Canterbury for 47 years, where my husband and I built our house. We still live there. We raised our 2 sons there. I worked as a teacher, an IT professional, and I ended my career at NHTI as a math professor. 2 years ago, I became finally a grandparent. And with that great joy came as Mason said, a greater sense of responsibility for her future. And that led me to step forward to attempt to serve my community and state as a legislator. And in the past 3 months, I have knocked on more than 800 doors, and I have heard that people are struggling, as people have said here already, to find affordable housing. Families are struggling to find accessible and affordable child care, which keeps people out of the job market, having to stay home. Women are struggling because their reproductive freedom is under attack every year in the State House. Property taxpayers, especially those on low and limited incomes and fixed incomes, are struggling to pay their property taxes, and at the same time, public education is struggling to get enough money to provide the resources we need. Most importantly, what I know is that the environment is at risk, and We are struggling with changing climate. We have caused this. We need to stop putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and our state has done very little to get us to that point. I want to sit in the seat where I can vote to protect our health, to protect our environment, and to protect our state's economy by moving to a clean energy future.
Hi, I'm Mike Moffett, running for re-election. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to especially thank Doris. I know she's been a prime mover behind this, and I get messages from Doris. I've gotten quite a few over the years, and others of you as well. And I appreciate that you care, that you're here, that you've engaged me, that you let us know what you think. I'm a history guy. I love the fact that this building was built around 1738, whatever it was, when we were getting along with the king then. If you know anything about history, it just fascinates me to think of if these walls could talk. So anyway, I'm a New Hampshire native, many generations, both sides, from the North Country originally, Grofton, New Hampshire. I've been a teacher, a coach, a professor. I was a colleague of Ruth's at NHTI in Concord. And I've taught at public schools, parochial schools, military schools, community college, obviously, university. So education has been a big part of my journey. I spent a couple terms on House Education Committee. Most recently, I've been the chair of the House Committee on State, Federal Relations, and Veterans Affairs. I am a veteran. I was a Marine Corps reservist. I was in the Persian Gulf. Gosh, it was over 33 years ago. And more recently in Afghanistan in 2010. I was the oldest Marine in Afghanistan on a special assignment. So I try to respond to every message, as you know. My brochures, I have some in the back. They haven't all been scooped up, but I think they're all still there. And I'm running because I care about my state, my country, and my community. Thanks again for being here.
Great, fantastic, thank you. So now I'm going to start this way. If I don't get too close to that speaker, we'll be okay. So the first general question for each of you, and you each have 2 minutes to answer. If elected, well, let me step back. Canterbury is about to face a huge jump in our property taxes. And it brings up the topic of state aid to education. And so I would ask, if elected, how do you intend to either legislate or vote, if someone else legislates, on state aid for education?
Thanks, Jim. As I said, I have a lot of history in education. I read about, with great interest, I read about Canterbury's jump in the tax rate. And there's a lot of pieces of this. There's a lot of potential solutions, new taxes, more. For the state to give more aid to communities, we need new taxes. We need new sources of revenue at the state level. What does that mean? That's what the debate is. We need a broad-based tax. We need a sales tax, income tax. There are ways to target aid. We talked about this in Loudon a couple of days ago. And I also have to tell you, I'm on the red team, and I think spending is a piece of the puzzle that needs attention as well. We spend about $20,000 a year on a student, which means a student who goes for 12 years, we're spending $250,000 per student. And I think there's some efficiencies that can be gained. I'm also looking to see, I'm big on assessments and accountability. So there's some pieces to this, and the right combination of pieces is something we'll work out in the State House.
So, as Mike says, there are it's a complex issue, but I think what's clear is that the state has been decreasing revenues in certain areas, which I think we could increase again. We are just decreasing our interest in dividends tax at a time when we could be using that money to give that back to the towns to decrease our property taxes. That money is 80% of that money comes from people that make more than or that have assets that are like up to 14 million, those people can afford to pay that 5% interest and dividends tax. So that people who are struggling to actually just pay their property taxes to stay in their own homes don't have to struggle. It's just it's incredibly unfair kind of a tax. And it's unfair to the students too, because it's unfairly given across the state. Some towns have a lot of money and have lots of resources, and other towns don't. That is ultimately unfair. And I'm not sure if I have any time left. Okay, I could keep going.
40 seconds.
Okay. And that tax can be changed so that instead of applying to people who are making $2,400 or more in interest and dividends, it can be increased to perhaps $20,000, or in which case we would still recover, like, I wish I could find my number here, but I think it's something like $100 million back from just increasing that tax on the people who are extremely wealthy. There are some other reasons that I'm sure others here will share.
Thank you. Right now, New Hampshire ranks last in the nation in state support for public education. And not only is that personally embarrassing, it's just wrong. There is no fair funding of public education through the current model that we utilize, where it's primarily supported by property tax. And the more property tax a town collects, the better the education. So if a child happens to be born in Wolfboro, or Rye, or Newington, they can get the greatest education in the world. Unfortunately, if they happen to be born in Franklin or Pittsfield or some other community, they don't get so good. And I think that needs to be redistributed. There recently was, and there's been an ongoing legislation or legal battle, and it's been resolved by the New Hampshire Supreme Court in the Claremont decision, where they came out and said that what the state is providing for adequate education is not enough and needs to be increased. And they demanded that the state come up with a solution to increase the state support for public education. Well, what's happened recently is a legal brief, an amicus brief, has been filed, and signed on to that was Jose, Alvin, and Howard, that are in dispute of that. They filed with the New Hampshire Supreme Court to reject that, and basically what they're saying is they want to make it so that there is no legal responsibility for the state to support public education whatsoever. So it would all fall on property tax and homeowners. And I think that's incredibly disproportionate, and we need to make some changes to that.
Yeah, what you said. So, property tax, I'm a tax collector, and it's a real issue. This isn't something that is not supported in fact. This is a factual issue. We have to address it, and how I would address it, one idea is, why don't we legalize marijuana and tax it and have that funding offset education? Other ways we could address the property tax burden is by looking at the formula for the swept account and make sure the state is paying their fair share, because I don't believe they are. We are among the lowest in the nation for contributing to public education, and we need to change that. And I think it's a constitutional issue. Our Constitution, in my opinion, and this is where we get separated on this issue, is it is the state's responsibility to fund public education. And I believe as a tax collector, no publicly raised or collected tax dollars should be going towards any private or religious school. That's basic stuff. I will say a short story. In Deerfield, 2023, our tax rate went up $4. which led to an outrage in our community. This year it went up $2. It's still going to have a pretty dramatic effect, and we have to address this. So elect people that are going to work on this issue. Tax fighters say they're going to cut taxes, but they only seem to be cutting taxes for the wealthy.
One of the important things to remember is that all the spending that we do, the money has to come from somewhere. It comes from the people in the state of New Hampshire. So if we want to spend more money, we've got to collect more money in taxes. It doesn't matter what kind of tax plan you use. It can be, income tax or sales tax or property tax. It's still going to come from somebody. The one thing that can be done is to look at some of the expenses. One of the ideas that came around is the possibility of maybe consolidating some of the school districts or allowing them to consolidate to help reduce the overhead. Things like maybe having one superintendent for the entire county might be beneficial. These things need to be looked at. The court cases, there's still a court case involved. The amicus brief that was referred to was basically reminding the court that the Claremont decision basically put in a situation where when the legislature tried to comply, then more lawsuits were filed, and we were trying to get them to the court to understand that they need to come up with something other than something that will cause the anything that the legislature does end up being in court again. The endless string of lawsuits only helps the lawyers. Thank you.
So what you probably heard all these candidates is we talk about property tax, but we keep going back to the school. Because most of the towns, so I'm running the District 26, it has 8 towns. And of all those 8 towns in Canterbury, about 60 to 70% of your taxes is from the school district. It's paying for your schools. Now, why is that so high? I go to the school meetings, I see their budget. It doesn't look wasteful to me. If anybody knows a waste, please point it out. They're pretty thin. But it's because states keep walking back. They keep walking back what they're giving to the retirement, to the healthcare, to all of these pieces, which means that they walk back. We as towns have to step up and pay for that. You can get rid of your fire department, your police department, everything in town, and your taxes will still be high because what we have to pay for the schools. Now, there are some simple things that we do to start helping with that. So the meals and rooms tax that we already pay, let's not kid ourselves, we have a sales tax called meals and rooms tax. We have tax on cigarettes and alcohol and gasoline. We can give a portion of that back to the town. Right now, the state takes a disproportionate share of that away from the town. So Canterbury, for what you sell for your meals and rooms here, can go back to your town a greater share of that. Legalizing marijuana, which Kelly talked about. Alvin, who I'm running against, has voted against that 3 times. Although in a survey, he says he's for people homegrown marijuana. That doesn't make sense to me because one, it creates an unregulated market, and also we're not getting any tax money from that. And guess what? All of our states around us sell it, and guess it's coming in here. So second one is returning the business tax to where it is. Now Evan says that it has to come from people in New Hampshire. Guess what? The majority of our business taxes that come in are from out-of-state corporations. That's where the money comes. Let's bring it back and bring that money back to Canterbury and to every other town that's here. And if we're doing legalized marijuana, earmark it for schools. Thank you.
All right. Second general question. Again, if elected, how would you vote and or legislate in terms of reproductive rights?
2 minutes.
We were in Loudon a couple nights ago, and one of the questions I asked is, what happened to our libertarian Republicans? What happened to the Republicans that used to say, hey, your business, I'm not going to get in there, and our business is our business. But somewhere along the way, they decided that wait, we need to start getting between you and your doctor. We need to start telling you know how many thousands of hours our legislation has spent on just culture wars, has talked about, they spent thousands of hours, who can use what bathroom, what kids can go, what sports, what teachers can and cannot say. This is what they spent their time on, not on how to bring down their taxes, literally thousands of hours. On that. When it comes to, they'll say the Republicans at this table are going to say, oh, we're fine with the law as it is. But when it came to codify that law in our Constitution, they voted against it. Alvin voted against it. If you're fine with the law, put it in our Constitution, let's be done with it. But what they're waiting is for the tides to change and to go. I'm for not getting between the doctor and somebody else's choice, medical choice. And that comes for a physician-assisted suicide, it's physician-assisted death as well. That's what Alvin voted against that. I'm a hospice volunteer. Not many people have to suffer. My stepmother had ALS. The only way she could die was to starve herself, to refuse food. We allow our pets to die with dignity, but we do not allow in the state of New Hampshire to stop that suffering. Alan thinks that when he voted against that, when the bill came up, he thinks that's not right. Well, guess what? When I am a hospice volunteer and the veterans at Tilton's, the Veterans Administration, I want you to go up there as their loved ones are dying and suffering and say, hey, it's your idea of what it should be and should not be, it's worth their suffering. It's not. It's something they deserve better, we deserve better, and stop getting between us and our doctors. Thank you.
Thank you. As my counterpart just said, I would support the existing laws for abortions. I think abortion is a bad thing. I'm pro-life. I wish there was no need for abortions, but I understand circumstances where there should be. And the current law allows up to 6 months with no questions asked for any reason. I think that is a satisfactory compromise. That's what many of the other states have. Even California, which supposedly is extremely liberal, has a 6-month limit on abortions. Thank you.
Well, I think that protecting reproductive freedoms is paramount because I see it more as a civil rights issue. As a woman, if I were to be faced with that decision and I was beyond the 6 months, I don't think it's any of your business what decision I make. I feel that we need to enshrine this in our Constitution so we're not coming back every 2 years and fighting about this. Late-term abortions are very rare and often at the heartbreaking decision of the mother. And I don't think politicians have any business with your consequential medical decisions. And one comment came up at the Deerfield Dems committee meeting recently, and a woman said, and she kind of turned it around, and this might not be appropriate, but I thought it was interesting, it made me think. What if a man had prostate cancer and he had to remove all of the cancer, but that would render him unable to have children? Should that man be able to make his choice in dignity and in private? Or should he break the law and go to another state and maybe get a doctor arrested for performing an operation? Let's look at it from a rights perspective. I hate the idea of abortion, but I want my choice. It's none of your business.
Thank you, Kelly. Women's rights, women's reproductive rights, it goes beyond just reproductive. It's a freedom to choose. It's equality. It's the opportunity. It's contraception. It's many other issues beyond just reproductive rights. But in terms of protecting a woman's right to choose. I think that's a decision that a woman and her medical professional are the only two that need to be involved in that decision. State legislators, myself, anybody on this table, we have no input in that decision on that woman's life. So I think we need to stay out of that. It's interesting. Everybody proclaims that they're all in favor of our 24-week current situation, but nobody that is a current legislator voted to put that into a constitutional amendment. So they don't want to put the law behind what they're saying, which means that it can change. And in 2023, a 6-week abortion ban came up in the House legislature. It was overwhelmingly defeated, but Jose and Mike voted against defeating it. So I don't really understand how that can be. And in 2022, they wanted to add fatal fetal anomalies to the exceptions. Again, that was voted against by our representatives. So I think they need to put their votes behind the conviction that they established. And I think that a woman's right to choose is fundamental. And if you live in this state, everybody should have the right to a free choice.
I also believe that women should have reproductive freedom and choose what is best for them, and that decision should be between them and their doctor. And has been said, like less than 1% of late-term abortions after 24 weeks occur because it is such a wrenching decision to carry a child for 24 weeks and then have to give that child up because of your health or the child's health. There should be no issue with you being concerned about whether your doctor will go to prison because they're helping you with this procedure. That is morally wrong, to add that burden to an already difficult decision. I would vote to codify this, and I think, as Mason said, it needs to be codified. We spend too much time on this issue, and it should just become part of the Constitution.
Current New Hampshire law is in sync with most other states, as has been said. I support the current New Hampshire law. Like most people support it. There's no restrictions for 6 months of a pregnancy, and I think during that time that such reproductive decisions should lie with the woman, her doctor, or God, and her partner, who oftentimes just doesn't get mentioned. Late-term abortions are thankfully rare, as has been stated. But I do agree with the large majority of Americans, I agree with most people, most Americans, that to allow late-term abortions of viable fetuses is extreme and horrific. And that's where I am on that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. And now we will turn it over to audience questions. So if we have anyone in the room, I haven't received a Zoom question yet. Zoomers, you have my cell phone if you want to text me a question. Yes, and I will repeat back the question so it gets on the Zoom microphone.
I have a question. First I want to say, I'm very glad that Howard Pearl didn't come when he was sick. I'm sorry that he was sick. I would have liked for him to come so I could have heard his viewpoint. Can you hear me? You look like you're leaning.
I'm older, I'm having trouble hearing.
I can yell loud.
Well, let me repeat, but again, I want you to cut to a question. But anyway, she said that she felt sorry that Howard was not here because she wanted to hear his opinions on things. So you have a question?
That leads me to the question, does anybody know why Jose is not here?
I said he had a prior engagement down in Nashua with a group of Hispanic ministers.
And I want to point out that the last time I came to a forum such as this, which was a couple of years ago, Jose was not here that time either. And honestly, I feel disrespected that he doesn't seem to think that coming to our forum in our town is important. worth his time.
Okay.
That's not a
For
question,
the,
it's a statement.
for the Zoom folks, we have one in the audience who is disappointed that Jose has missed 2 of these in a row. Questions?
More than disappointed, I think it says something about him that we
Thank
need
you.
to think about.
Okay, Ruth.
So I'd like to know, and we heard from several of you already, but where climate change ranks in your list of issues that, and we have a myriad of things that need to be addressed, but where does climate change rank? And what role do you think the state legislature has to play in addressing climate change?
So the question is, where does climate change rank in the scheme of things legislatively? And
What role does the New Hampshire legislature?
what role does the legislature have in helping New Hampshire to affect that in a positive way? And 1 minute each.
Thanks for the question. I think climate change is real. Climate's changing, obviously. It always changes. How much does man contribute to that? That's the debate. There's a spectrum of debate on how much humans contribute to that. I'm sorry? I'll take 10 seconds back. Yeah, so there's no unanimity amongst scholars and scientists on the extent that man contributes to that. I care about the environment. I think we've done a great job with rivers and air, no lead gasoline. We've done wonderful things. There have been many, I've got a list of 50 pronouncements of, some say hysterical projections. What should we do? Last time the other side had control of the House, they had bills in to ban wood stoves. I oppose that. California and other states want to ban gas-powered vehicles. I oppose that. Some people want to have tax credits. Those who are going to follow me in a moment can tell us. I'm opposed to not tax credits, but carbon credits. I oppose that. And I'll pass this on.
So I think that for me, the climate changing is one of the issues I've been working on for decades. I've been aware of it. I've been concerned about it. I think it's an extremely dangerous thing for the state to ignore it and say, oh, the market will take care of it. Oh, we need these fossil fuels. If we had been investing in renewables and incentivizing them the way other states around us have, we would be in much better state to be to have our energy prices lower, but also we don't even have goals to get us to anything more than 25% decrease in greenhouse gases. That is because the legislature voted against that. We need to set goals and then try to reach them through incentivizing and, well, I guess I don't have much more time. There's lots of things. Net metering, increasing the net metering amounts we're allowed to have. But I think they'll be touched on by others.
Again, as is the case on other issues, we seem to be a donut hole among our surrounding neighbors. We do not encourage alternative energy sources. You go across on Interstate 89, as soon as you cross the Connecticut River into Vermont, you see arrays and arrays of solar panels. You go into Maine, you see the same thing. You go down into western New Hampshire, western Massachusetts, you see the same thing. We do not incentivize, and I think that we are falling behind, and I think we are ignoring the vast issue that climate change poses for our environment. I think it's a great part of our economic development that if we were to encourage more climate-friendly initiatives, that would do more to incentivize people to move into New Hampshire than anything else. Thank you.
And to kind of tag on to what you said, one of our best assets is our environment. We live in such a beautiful state. We have mountains and rivers, and we have the ocean and lakes. And in 2023, 2022, There were all kinds of positive legislation that worked towards keeping our waters clean. And in Deerfield, we have Pleasant Lake, we have Pawtuckaway, we have Bear Brook, we have all kinds of rivers and streams, and it's so important that we keep them clean, and I'll always support that.
I too want to keep our environment clean. There are a lot of things that we can be doing. One of the things we do need to watch out for is some of the hidden costs and environmental impacts that are not prominently mentioned when we talk about solar panels, the cost to actually fabricate all those panels and what to do with them once they're dead. The same with the wind turbines. Those also have problems with the cost of making things and the cost of disposal when they are wearing out. In New Hampshire, we have an opportunity coming up to get new, clean, late technology nuclear power, which I think would be a good thing because there's no carbon dioxide emission from that.
Climate change is real. I mean, you just have to look outside, ask any farmer, and read any study in the past 5, 10 years. It'll say man has had the biggest impact on it. Now, in New Hampshire, by addressing climate change, it shouldn't be a partisan issue, but sometimes it feels like it. It's so good for the economy. Look at all the companies that are out there that are doing the solar panels. You have Visions, you have 603 Solar, you have Granite Solar. It's amazing amount of jobs that they're creating. Why we would not invest more in that, I don't know. But I know Alvin voted against when we had a chance to move net metering from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. He voted against it. When we had a chance to pass a law to make us have a net zero goal for zero emissions, Alvin voted against it. It's real, and we can do something about it. And guess what? It can help our economy as well. Wow, what a wonderful thing.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Public school budgets, public school expenses, public school academic achievement, testing, SATs, high school level, are all public records accessible to people in the communities. And reference has been made to accountability in public school spending. On the other hand, my question is, when it comes to educational freedom accounts or voucher programs, there might be parents who look at public school data and say, I think something different is better for my child. But what evidence do we have that any of those students are achieving any differently than what they would have or what they were achieving in public schools? And what evidence do you have that the money being distributed through education freedom accounts is actually being spent appropriately? Are there similar kinds of budgetary or financial examination of records for education freedom accounts as there are for public schools?
Okay, let me see if I can condense this. That basically is that there's a contrast between public education spending and results, and therefore the efficient use of public dollars on that, and the use of public dollars going into voucher programs and freedom accounts and so forth, where the data don't appear to be readily available in terms of how that money gets spent, so return on the dollar, and also the outcomes that students have. So, opinions on that?
So the last studies I looked at, homeschoolers actually, when it comes to testing, score higher on average than private or public schools. We spend about $21 million on these freedom accounts. What you can spend at religious or private schools, our tax money at religious or private schools. Money that's not going to Canterbury, to your public school, or any of these other towns. That's expected to be $50 million, grow to $50 million. Elvin has voted to increase that. Has voted to increase that fund just this last last session. It takes so much. I'm saying if you want to do that, it's fine. Fund our public schools fully first, then look at an alternative situation. Don't drain them and try to find. Our charter schools open and close all the time in New Hampshire. There's a lot of the people are not accountable for that. So it's a great question. Thank you.
As for the accountability, the EFA requires that anyone spending any funds from this actually have to have the receipts in hand to get reimbursed for it. It's not just a gift. The achievements, it may be hard to tell, but one thing that we do know is not every child is the same, and a one-size-fits-all school system does not necessarily fit everybody.
So there's so many legs to that question, and I don't have a lot of time, but I feel that school choice in theory is a good thing, right? But it's not when publicly collected tax dollars are going towards private and religious schools. That's where I draw the line. And we have to consider this as a constitutional issue. For the kids that go to public school will not have the same advantages as the kids in the private and their choice schools.
So the program was initiated, the Education Freedom Account, to encourage those individual students who weren't getting what they needed out of the public schools, and encourage them to look at other avenues. The realism of it is that 80% of the monies that are going into the voucher program are going to families that already had their children in private or religious schools or homeschooling. So it's not encouraging anybody. Let's be real. If you're going to give $5,000 for a student to go to a private school and you're making $50,000 a year or $70,000 a year, that $5,000 isn't going to make it. You aren't going to be able to go to St. Paul's Academy, and that $5,000 is going to make any difference. So I'm saying these things are going to balloon. Right now we have the income levels up to 350% of poverty level. There are several states in the nation that are universal voucher programs. Indiana is looking to spend $350 million on their voucher program. Arizona is the highlight of voucher systems. They're going to spend $400 million. I think it's time we look at where we're really doing with our public dollars.
Has been said, spending this much money, 24 million this year, 50 million next year, is not a good way to spend our tax dollars in a way that is not accountable for what is happening with that money. I don't believe you have to return, you have to give receipts. You just get the money and say you're going to do this and that and the other thing. I am very much against this, and I would definitely vote against the voucher program if it comes up for legislation. And definitely, certainly would not vote to increase the minimum or the income level that people could still get it at.
So Mason seemed to refer to, or did refer to money being drained from public education in favor of these other options. That's just untrue. That's a canard that's been out there. It gets people all upset, and it's not true. Not a single dollar has been taken away from any education, public education budget account whatsoever so far. So that needs to be said. I do support EFAs for families. I support parents trying to do the best thing that they can for their kids, tax-paying parents. And I do share your concern about assessments. I'm big on assessments, I'm big on accountability, and I am concerned, and I've said this to other people, about homeschoolers. I think most homeschoolers are fabulous, but I worry about some homeschoolers falling through the cracks, and that same goes for some of the charter schools and other schools. So I share your concern there.
Thank you. Other audience questions? Yes, in the back.
Cost of education education benefits everybody in the state, all the students in all the different high schools and elementary schools. However, we don't collect it the same way. Some towns have less value in their property and some towns have more. And it turns out that it ends up that some kids benefit by the town they live in. How do you feel about what's called equalized property tax, the statewide property tax that every town would kick in on an equalized basis to the education of kids, rather than individual towns like Pittsfield getting very little or Portsmouth getting a whole lot more?
So the question is about equalized property taxes across the state, so that it doesn't matter how wealthy your town is or how poor your town is, all students would be receiving the same kind of support for property taxes across the state.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, SWEP stands for Statewide Education Property Tax. That is in place. It's a little bit of a shell game. I think a lot of you understand that. There are mechanisms in place. I mentioned this in Loudon. There are mechanisms in place to support the Pittsfields and the Franklins. If you look at the formula for state aid education, we're doing that. Can we do it more? Can we do it differently? That's a fair question that we can look at. Equalized property valuation. This gets us into the realm of donor towns, which is a really volatile issue. But I think that it's a fair question to look at the formulas and to revisit some different approaches in terms of, I hate to say it, but donor towns.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes?
Can we just add that 30 seconds to the answers that our panelists put on this question?
Sure. We have time for that. So you want to add another 30 seconds to your response? So
Sure, thanks for the 30 seconds. I'm not saying I favor donor towns, but I do think it's useful to revisit every aspect of the funding formula and have a debate. And we're very public at the State House, so I think it's fair to take a look at all the options in terms of school funding.
And Mike, that wasn't just for you to have 30 seconds.
No, we understand. Everybody gets
We all get that.
Oh, it's just being nice to give him this 30 seconds. So I too feel that we do need to look at our funding formulas. It is fundamentally unfair for students to get less money spent on them depending on where they are in the state. And it is fundamentally unfair for people who are living in a $125,000 home in a low property value town to be paying just as much property tax, and maybe even less than someone with $1 million or $2 million home on the lake when Winnipesaukee in Sandwich, let's say. There is something fundamentally wrong with that. And we need to fix that. I'm happy to work across the aisle with Mike, if we're there together, and any other Republican to fix this situation. I don't know what the answer is yet. I don't have all the data. I don't have all the options, but I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to work across the aisle.
Well, it really is an immoral system that we have in place, that in a town like Wolfboro or one of the lake towns where the majority of the homes are in excess of millions of dollars, these are second homes for out-of-state residents. They don't have children going to school there, but they're paying the property tax into those towns. And so the towns the amount of money that's going per student that's actually utilizing those property taxes is extraordinary compared to those towns where it's year-round homes. But I think the basic fundamental that we have to look at is what they term adequate funding. And the adequacy formula that the state utilizes, as Mike alluded to, it costs over $20,000 per student to educate a student. The state is contributing $4,000 and something. When you add in SWEP, it's about $7,000. Well, that's vastly inappropriate compared to what it's costing to educate those students. I think that whole formula needs to be looked at. And I don't think that we should be filing legal briefs and lawsuits against the Supreme Court decision that we need to come up with a higher formula for what this adequate education really amounts to.
So I think I'm going to go back to the Constitution. I think the intent of the Constitution was that the students, all students, get the fair education, proper education that they deserve. It doesn't matter which zip code or town you live in. So I'm against donor towns. I don't think that's fair. And I think that we need to hold Concord to it every single year. We need to look at that formula. We need to hold them accountable. We need to adjust it because people are being taxed out of their homes and we have to do something about it.
One thing we have to remember is that throughout the state, all the properties are different. They all have their unique features and benefits and disadvantages, and each town has got different property values, the value of the town, the land they're on, the buildings that have been there for ages. So there are some towns that are richer than others, and I don't think any kind of tax formula that you can come up with is going to really appropriately account for that and be satisfactory to the majority of the people.
At the beginning of the school year down in Londonderry, in Derry, they were handing out the iPads and the laptops that every student gets. Every student gets. How many of the students, I live in the town of Boston, and Boston is one of the 13 property poor towns in the state. Our taxes are through the roof. If I told you how much I was paying like it did in London, in the Loudon event, it would make your jaw drop. It's just not fair. But we don't have to have donor towns. We have the ability to bring taxes, the business profit tax back to where it was, which is the majority of that is coming from out-of-state corporations. That money can be earmarked back to the school systems, earmarked back to those who are in property poor towns to bring them up so they can have the same level of education. We can do things like legalizing marijuana, have that money earmarked. All the states around us have it. All we're doing is allowing people to buy it over the lines and not regulate it in our state. So we have abilities to do this. We have ability without taking from one town to give to another. Yes, our system of property tax, the way the formula is, it's very complicated. It can be simplified, it can be improved, willing to work on that. But yes, we can do ways without having to have donor towns and help our schools across the state.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question and then the wrap-up from our panel. And if you want to go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, I would like to ask the candidates what they would do about the New Hampshire housing crisis. In New Hampshire, we have such a terrible housing shortage that, for one thing, people who would like to come and contribute their skills to the state of New Hampshire, nurses, teachers, doctors, engineers, they can't afford to come here. And for another thing, families, especially young families, cannot afford housing for their growing number of children. And it's a terrible problem for New Hampshire. I'd like to know what you do about it.
So the last question of the evening has to do with our housing crisis and what in the legislature you would intend to do about it.
It is a huge crisis, and it's a crisis that goes beyond just people living. It goes beyond our labor market. It goes beyond the majority of the businesses I see that go out of business because they can't get labor. Can't get labor because people can't live here. They can't afford to live here. There's not housing available for them. We do have small amounts of public housing that go in, like one over in Pennacook. I think it's called Rose's Place that did really well. We can look at that, but we can also look at regulations. We did pass one a little while ago to allow ADUs, accessory dwelling units. There was one that came up that allowed 2 ADUs. Alvin voted against it, so people can have their children live on their land, live next to them. We need to start looking at the regulation that restricts the housing, but at the same time, keeping in mind our environment, keeping in mind what we need, what we treasure about New Hampshire. But there is so many opportunities that we have out there to increase our housing with what we're doing now and ways to support that. And it goes beyond, like I said, just housing. It's a labor issue as well.
Thank you. The biggest problem for the state is trying to work with the various towns and cities to come up with something that is helpful for the towns and cities, but it's not just a one-size-fits-all dictate from up above to say you will do this or you will do something else. None of the towns like that kind of approach, and the ADU bill that was just mentioned that I voted against, that's another one of the bills where the devil's in the details. Some of the details in that bill were not acceptable. There were good parts and there were bad parts, and I felt the bad parts outweighed the good parts. Thank you.
So I think to address the housing crisis in New Hampshire, it is going to take participation from local and state. And at the local level, we need to be involved in our master planning, strategic planning, because that's how you grow smart. And it would be so nice if communities would really take the master plan very seriously, because that's going to have the biggest impact on your taxes over the long haul. It'd be also really nice if we could think outside the box and make incentives for developers to create communities that match our lifestyles, like green communities, off-grid communities, you know, houses that are smaller than the required square footage, because frankly, I don't need a big house. I just need room for me and my cat. So, and at the state level, they need to offer incentives for developers to come in here and do this. So we got a lot of work to do.
I think that local communities need to look to some of the larger cities and see some of the avenues that they've researched and that they've developed. Manchester developed over 2,000 new units of affordable housing. In Loudoun, we have 2 co-op communities. And I think that's another approach that we might want to look at. I've talked to the board at each of these co-op communities, and in those areas, we lived in one actually up in Belmont for a while, where the property is all owned by the developer, and then you rent the land, and it's a much more affordable scenario. And these places are full, and I think there's more that could be done to develop some more of these co-op communities that I think could then provide more housing, which would then lead to more economic development, lead more jobs, and help some of the labor market and encourage people to move in.
There does need to be a mix between local changes to zoning laws and to some extent incentives from the state level. I think as Kelly was talking, I was thinking, and then she said it, why don't we allow smaller homes? We don't need gigantic homes. And that is something that can be addressed in zoning laws. It can be incentivized by the state. also allowing multifamily homes, encouraging more multifamily homes. As I've been going around Loudon, I've just seen some really interesting smaller footprint homes being shared by two different households. So I think that's another way we can address this. It's not going to be a short-term issue, however, and we do have to be careful about making sure we do that in such a way that our agriculture, our forestry, our water is not impacted. So it is a difficult problem.
Sure, I think there are some things that can happen in Concord with the legislature that would make a difference in terms of looking at state requirements that can be revisited, regulations, codes. I think there's some things definitely that we can look at that would make it easier for people to build. Ruth mentioned, she didn't say tiny houses, but that's kind of what I heard. And I like that idea. You know, I don't fit in a tiny house necessarily, but I like the, I've seen some, and I think they're really neat. And I don't have a lot of clutter, so that's why maybe it works for me. Kelly mentioned local issues, and that's so true. Local ordinances and zoning, some communities do very well. Keene is an example. It's a blue college town, and their requirements to build there are just onerous. But that's Keene, you know, that's local control. So a lot of this has been said is really up to communities to make some inroads in this area.
Jim, is there enough time for one more
There
question?
is, Doris. Actually, it's amazing. Brevity really is a gift. So yes, I have time for another question if there's another question. Oh, does Doris have a question?
Doris, yes.
Yes.
Let's see if I can frame it. It seems to me over time that the public schools have often been a very important hub of a community. And it seems that our state and our country is moving away from the idea of public schools. And less money, they're struggling more, people are moving more and more to private opportunities. And I'm just wondering whether you see it that way, and what is it that we can do to bring our communities together in this time of such polarized communities.
So the question looks at the sort of the erosion of support for public schools as a center of communities. And the question is, do you agree with that it's been happening, and how do you see a way to support that kind of community-centered public education?
Thanks for the extra question. It's a great question. I come from a small town, and you're right. Growing up in Groveton, the school was the center of our town, and we had everything happened there. And when I was in school, when I was young, there was no such thing as homeschooling. There was no such thing as charter schools. There was none of that. So how did this happen? So I think part of the answer is I think the folks in public education have to try to think and review and reflect on what has happened in the last generation or two to cause so many people to want to leave public education and to homeschool. There are some perceived anti-parent policies in many places that have caused parents to homeschool. There are other numerous school policies. When I was talking about a quick example, Kearsarge and Plymouth have gone against a law that was passed and signed by Governor Sununu to have biological boys play on boys teams and biological girls play on girls teams. And yet there are several schools that are just doing their own thing, breaking the law, and that's just one example, and you may not agree with me on it, but I just want to give you one example of many that have caused so much disaffection in public education. So I think part of the answer is for the education community and establishment, which I'm part of, to look at ourselves, look at themselves and say, why are people not supporting schools like they used to?
Well, I really wish I knew the answer to that. I do think that we are becoming a little bit less community-oriented, and community is extremely important to me. I think Canterbury is very lucky to have such a strong sense of community. It doesn't always just happen at our school level. I think it's a cultural shift, and I frankly I wish I had an idea of how we could change that, because it would be nice to have more community spirit across our state and across the country. Some of that I think has to do with just generally, I don't think we can legislate this, but general civility and generally respecting each other. I don't think that's happening in the media, and I don't think it's happening in politics from the top. So I can't say that's something that has caused people to want to leave public education, but I think you're talking about the sense of community also. So.
Well, you're right, Doris. Public schools are like the magnet of a community. They bring everybody together. They create economic development. The better the quality of the public education, the more people want to move there, the more businesses want to move into that community, the more they want to have their families live there. And it's all part of, the whole process of public affordable housing, quality education, good natural resources, and a good quality of life. We all grew up in, we're all of a certain age that we all grew up for the most part. I didn't do that.
Could be the banner you go.
We grew up in an era of going off to Naperville Community High School or Naperville Middle School, where I grew up. And we had that sense of community within that school. And I think what we've lost is that where an individual family or an individual student has a certain issue, and then that becomes an issue for the whole school. And I think what we need to look at is for the better welfare of the whole community and the quality of that education that we're providing and the funding that we're giving to those schools.
I think, it's not just education. Our country has become so disengaged on so many levels, and I think that we can fix this, but we have to do it. We have to get involved, and I think so many people are living their lives, working their jobs. They're not even thinking while we're sitting here tonight trying to fix these issues, they're thinking about their kids, paying rent, gotta get groceries, gotta get milk, and it's just passing by them. And we're getting farther and farther away, and we're becoming more apathetic. But I do think people are waking up, and I was so upset when I first ran because I didn't feel like I was represented and conquered, And then as I'm going through this process, I'm noticing there's so many people that are not engaged, and there's the citizens that are engaged. And it's not that they're bad people, they're living their lives. We need to change that. We need to get back to community. We need to get involved, and I think that'll help.
As far as the trend away from public support for public schools, public education, I think part of that, and it's probably a big part, is really rests on the local school districts of why they aren't addressing what people perceive as the needs for their child. and they're saying this is the way we do it, and if you don't like it, get out. Well, a lot of them are getting out. And they may not have used those words of like or leave it, but I think it's incumbent upon the individual schools and school districts to try to explain to people why they can support the varied needs for children and the parents.
It's a great question, Doris. There's a book called Bowling Alone. And it's all about how our individual community groups have dissolved. My father used to be a member of the Knights of Columbus. I remember going there and lots of other families there and getting together. Knights of Columbus, the Elks, the Rotary Club, church attendance at community, at our town hall meetings. They're all going down and decreasing numbers, some rapidly. If you go to, so I live in Boston, the Merrimack Valley School District, if you go to their annual meeting, which we said before is 60-70% of most towns' budget, there is a fraction of voters that show up. I can tell you when I was a select board member of Webster, we had more people showing up for our town meeting in Webster than we were having in the entire district school meeting of Merrimack School District. So what can we do? We have some wonderful programs up there to get people together to re-engage them. UNH Extension has amazing programs that gets us out there, whether it's a Master Gardeners, sites programs, coverage programs. The state should be investing more in that to get us connected through different means. And when it comes to the school, it's tough. I'm a adjunct professor at UNH Law. I see at UNH at the college level too that that's decreasing. So it's a tough question, but I think it's a community question.
Wow. All right. So now we have reached the wrap-up stage. So each of you has 2 minutes to say whatever else you need to say.
I started when that's it. I started at the beginning of it. I wanted to be fair.
Like I say, I wanted to be fair because I started off with the intro. So there's not I've said before, there's not a person at this table that doesn't love New Hampshire. We're all here to love it. We owe a big debt of gratitude to whoever serves as a senator or as a state rep. We get a whole $100, so they get a whole $100 a year. And it's a lot of work. You have to be passionate about New Hampshire. But we see improving New Hampshire differently. One of the things I wanted to tell you here is I wanted to show you a difference between what Elva and I are running for the same position for Merrimack County, Fulterio District 26. I wanted to bring up things he was voting for and my side, so you can vote with a clear head of, oh, these are the issues I align with. I asked you for your vote if my issues align with yours. So there's ways that we can support our schools without increasing our property taxes. There's ways in which we can support women's reproductive freedoms and codify it in the Constitution. There's ways in which we can support our environment, having that net zero goal by 2050, of looking at other ways of protecting our lakes and our waterways, at the same time looking at housing. They're not unfixable problems. But as I said at the beginning of this, the current legislation has spent thousands of hours focusing on culture wars, not on fixing this. Focusing on what teachers can and cannot say in the schools, what bathrooms, what sport teams. They spend all the time, instead of fixing these problems that came out here tonight. Every hour they spend on that, they're not focusing on the things that are so important to you and make such a difference, not just today, but as I said, for my kids' future, beyond me, beyond ourselves. That's what we need to be looking at, beyond ourselves. So if my issues align with yours, I ask you for your vote, and thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Sing your song, brother.
I want to thank you all for being here and sitting through all this yakking about all the problems and how we can or can't solve the problems. I want to try to do the best I can, in particular to not force increases in taxes, because we're already, and it's been clear here tonight, we're already paying too much in taxes. The problem is, everything we want to spend money on, the money has to come from somewhere, and New Hampshire doesn't get it to print it. So I'd like you to vote to return me to the State House, and I'll do the best I can for all the citizens of Canterbury as well as the whole state. Thank you.
So I hope to earn your trust and your vote on November 5th. And I want you to know that I will work hard for you, and I will work with all the players involved. And I think what we need is someone that can really work in a bipartisan way. And I feel that my training as a clerk and collector has given me the ability to work with people of varying opinions and styles, and we need to replace the word compromise with collaboration. We need to start getting things done in New Hampshire, and I vote for me.
Also, thank you for being here tonight, giving up your evening. Having lived throughout the country and experiencing many different cultures and personalities and job experiences, military experiences, I think I've learned to develop a very great skill in listening. I think communication is a two-way street, and many of us focus way too much on talking and way too little on listening. And if you really listen to what people are saying and what people want, I think we can probably make a significant difference. In going around to the many homes, as Ruth indicated, talking door to door and talking to our citizens, it breaks my heart that I've talked to, and I know it's a small number, but 2 individual senior citizens who are selling their homes because they can't afford the property taxes anymore and moving out of state with their children. And another person who I was personally involved with was already left, sold his house, and moved to Tennessee with his daughter. And I think, if nothing else, by going into taking a seat in the House of Representatives, and if I can do anything to help relieve that burden on those individuals, then I think my time will be well spent. I believe in one thing, and that's common sense. If it makes common sense, let's do it. And we live in a live free or die society, live free or die state. And I think that needs to apply to every single citizen, no matter your age, your religion, your sexual orientation, your political affiliation, your reproductive needs, or your zip code. I think everybody deserves the right to live free. Thank you, and I look forward to your vote.
So, I mentioned in the beginning some of the issues I was concerned about, because I really want to sit in a seat where I can make positive change on the issues, so that I can stand with women, so I can stand with workers to get a livable wage, so I can stand with public schools and with property taxpayers, so that we can find equitable ways to fund the needs of our public education system. And to stand most of all with our environment. I'm really passionate about this. But I think that what I bring to it particularly is that I really want to create a sense of community in any of the places that I do work or that I volunteer in. And I do that because I believe when we work together that we can solve these problems, and that we have to respect each other. We have to listen really deeply. As Ed said, we have to think really critically and be able to think with open minds about what happens, and then seek common ground. And that's what you can trust that I would do in the State House. And you can trust that I will work very, very hard, so that our children and grandchildren have a safe and healthy and livable future. And that's why I ask you to trust me with your vote.
Still 30 seconds.
That's okay, you may have it.
I'll take it. I'll try not to take Luke's 30 seconds, but thanks for offering that. Thank you all for being here. I see there's 3 cameras. I don't know which one is C-SPAN, but welcome to anyone who is watching from afar. I hope for your vote, obviously. I love being in the State House. I used to teach government, civics, history, love that stuff. I've been going there for years, and I still, every day I walk in there, I look at the paintings and the history, and I just, I love being in the mix and having a vote. I know everybody here would like to have that opportunity to have a seat in the vote. I love my 2 towns, very different communities. We were in Loudon the other day, and Canterbury today, very different towns, and they have their own cultures, and I think they complement each other in some ways. I'm glad that we have these 2 different towns in this district. I don't always love some of the edgy stuff. I get smacked around in my primary, but I don't want to complain about that. Here, it's what we sign up for. Sometimes there's a letter in the monitor that's not quite the way I write it, or it's critical. My mom's going on 95 and she lives in Concord. I think, oh man, Mom's going to read that. But she's tough. She's tough too. She's a very tough. She's from a farm up north. So anyway, I'm proud of my attendance record. I've been doing this for 6 years. I have almost 100% voting record. You all know, most of you should know, I respond. Love to respond. And one thing I'm proud of, some of the bills that have been passed. I also was a prime mover after Steve Scalise got shot in D.C. I brought together both sides of the aisle. We put together a softball game, legislative softball classic, and we raised a lot of money for veterans in the Liberty House. And then we had last year, 2023, I did the same thing with some colleagues, and we had a golf tournament that raised over $20,000. So example of both sides coming together, having fun, playing golf, and there you go. So hoping to stay the next after November 5th, and thanks again.
I would like to thank you. First of all, we have not just 6 talking heads up here, we have 6 very brave people. Brave to deal with who knows what question will come across, but also wishing to be brave enough to represent us in our legislature in times that have an awful lot of challenges. So I really appreciate each of you for running, and definitely please come see me on the 5th. I'll be there at the checkout all day. Definitely vote and make sure your neighbors vote. So thank you again to the organizers, and until we do this next time.